Hello, and welcome to another weekly live stream where I code some Mythruna stuff. You guys help me with questions, and we have a good time and hopefully get something productive done by the end of the day. Today I'm going to be working on adding animation to the object assemblies. We'll talk about what that means in a minute, and I'll go over some of the Unity component system stuff and how that works. So before we get too much further, let me thank the patrons. You guys rock. I mean, there's not really much else to say, but how awesome you guys are. Thanks so much. It means a lot that you guys still support me. And so let's see, go to the Drost effect here and move that down. Minimize that. All right, so let me find the window that I need because I got too many things open. Okay. So let's run the game. And I'll show you what I got done this week. We'll talk about what's next and how I'm going to do that and so on. While that's loading, you probably remember before I had this thing up where, I talked about the object assemblies and what we were supposed to do. This was probably a couple weeks ago. And so like this version is just as flexible as possible where you can pretty much create anything you want. Basically one-to-one mapping to the data. And eventually, it would be more constrained, crafting based and so on. But right now, this is what we were focused on. And from there, I added a bunch of to-do items as I went. And you can see I got most of these done. The thing I don't have done is in-game animation. I also don't have help text for the assembly editing. And so that's what we'll work on today. And let's see. Let's jump in to my... Oops. I picked the wrong character. Good morning, Rom Cram. How's it going? It's evening here, but morning where you are. All right. So this is not the character I want, but I'm down in a dungeon. Actually, this might be cool. Yeah. So I went and I changed the dungeon generation to use the new objects so that if you're in here, of course it's taking forever to load because there's a lot to log when you're coming in here. Let's let it load for a second. So one of the things I added was default actions. So rather than coming over here and right clicking and doing your thing, you can hover over it and it will show you what the default action is. You can look at that. I guess these aren't set up right. These are supposed to be, so that one is, this one isn't for some reason. So this one has, all the regular stuff, so you can open and close it. Oh, I remember. I regenerated the dungeon one. This is why we also get this weird thing here. I generated the dungeon once. Got caught up playing Mythruna, trying to figure out the workbench joints. I need to make a tutorial. I can answer questions here if we need to. So anyway, I generated the dungeon once, but the object types weren't set up right, and then I generated it again, but I accidentally generated it a little bit to the right, so you get one object that works and one object that doesn't. But now there's default. So if you hover over it, it'll tell you what the default is. If you keep hovering, it'll tell you what the default is. So that's going to be kind of nice. Like here, you can look at it, and it tells you what it is. Oh, it's a bit of great. Fixed to the floor. The reason I added this... Hi, Autumn. How's it going? The reason I added this is because I wasn't sure if it would be obvious to everyone when I have the quest giver NPC that you should just walk up and click on him. And so now if you walk up... When there is a quest giver NPC, if you walk up and click on him, or if you walk up and hover over him, it'll say talk, and if you click on him, it'll talk. I wasn't sure if anybody would know that they should right-click on the quest giver NPC and look at what options they had. Anyway, this was not the... Pelia is coding. Oh. So let me exit out of this one, see if it'll let me get in as the right character, because... that's kind of cool that I could show you guys that the dungeon generation, and that's actually in the version that's up released now, that the dungeon generation will generate the new object types where you can open and close the chests. Yes, so Fade is the one I want. Let's play Fade. She's my main woman. So, Beware. What was the Beware? I gotta look over here. Oh, a Mimic Beware. Okay, yeah, I did read that before. Okay. Alright, so... Yeah, I think that... I think my game is unhappy because I did the exit the world and enter the world again. So let's just kill it. And then let's try again. Also, I've Oak is in my server, so he's probably taken up a little bit of my network bandwidth at least. Although Mythruna is pretty light on bandwidth, so it shouldn't be too bad. But all right, so now we shouldn't have anything hanging out, and I'll real quickly go through some of the stuff I did. Also, when I have the live stream running, everything is slower. That is noticeably so. Since we have 5 concurrent viewers. If you are new to the stream, welcome. For the Horde. Alright, so we're back, and so yeah, so these can all be open and closed by default actions. You know, if you hover over this door, you say you close that door, you can open it again. And like we talked about before, these are all physical objects, so if this is closed, I can't walk through it. And the regular object tool, you know, will place these guys. So if I want to... Oh, I have a lockbox too. I made like a smaller version of the chest, so if you can make these little lockboxes. So you can open that guy too. And the neat thing is like assemblies are centered around, you know, whatever the origin was when you made them. So the fact that this is centered, it spins around its center. It's kind of cool. So yeah, you can close it, open it. So I'm glad you're excited. I'm excited too because I'm really excited to have quest givers. So anyway, there's all these things that you have default actions. So we think we went over the workbench before. Hopefully you're figuring it out, Oak. It's a little tricky, right? So, you know, you can come here, you know, the whole hinge parts and things, it's kind of weird. But the thing we want to do tonight is, you know, you saw when I was clicking on the chest, it would just open and close without any kind of animation. And what we would like it to do is do this sort of smoother animation. It's not going to be entirely smooth because of the way I'm going to do it is, the way I'm going to do it tonight is kind of a hack. But it's a hack that doesn't require a lot of infrastructure and will be better than what's there now. And so that's what we'll do. Like, because right now, if like you click on this, it's just bop, close, bop, open. So we'll at least have it, you know, 5 or 6 frames of animation in between there, which should be better than what we've got now. And that also means that if something was outside the door here, and you opened it, it would, you know, push it along rather than just skip by it completely. All right, so, and in that light, I will talk a little bit about entity systems. All of these objects are entities. The player is an entity. The thing they're holding in their hand is an entity. Each of these treasure chests is an entity. You know, the door is an entity, and so on. Blocks, not entities, but all these objects are entities. I have an Xmas tree. How to stick my joint on the object I wanted to move. So let me quickly go over the workbench real quick. So, okay, I have a Christmas tree and Yule logs to litter. Yes, that's true. You got to go check out the spawn. Okay, so real quick, workbench tutorial. So if you start a new design and you add a part, let's say we add. Where's the chest bottom? Okay, chest bottom carved, I think is what we want. Chest bottom carved. Yeah, so I'm going to make a little one. So, yeah, so we actually have a problem here because it left this old thing open. Crap. So there is a bug in the UI right now where if you had another object selected, it would do weird things. So let's demo. Let me come back because it should fix itself. If I come back, so we go back to demo, edit design. Nope, it did not. Okay, well, pretend that that's all there. Like I can't change. Oh, here I can change the scale. So I'm going to make a smaller one, right? I would prefer it to be centered, so I'm going to. Yeah, see, I can't. All right, let's go make a bigger one again. So, yeah. Okay, so let's say you've got this chest. Now the next thing you want to do, before you can put anything under that, you need to add a joint. So, oh, there, it fixed itself. Okay, cool. So you'd add a joint, and that's an open and closed joint. It's the only type you can create. All right, so that made a joint, and we can't see that. It's currently inside the object right now. So the easiest way to see the joint is going to be to make it pop up out of the... So you can see that's the little joint marker. The key is when you're in the base group, that's where you can put your part and your joint. Let me move this over to back over here. We'll move it up higher. Actually, I know it needs to be 0.5, so I'm just going to say 0.5. All right, and then so we want it to be right back here on the back of the chest. Really, we want it to line up with these guys. So that's probably right, or close enough for this demo. Okay, so this is the base. And so if you want something to go underneath the joint, you have to select that joint group up here. And we've got no parts in there right now. But that's where if we wanted to, we could add the chest ring and center it over that joint. Actually, it needs to be a little bit offset. Okay, so because it's under that joint, it's affected by the joint. I know this is fiddly, and I apologize, but like the user interface can only be so complicated, right? So if we go back to the base, we can see our joint's still there. If we open and close the joint, it will move this thing because we have the closed position up here, but we haven't made the open position, right? So it's going to slide. So we have to make these guys match, right? And then you can give it a pitch. So if you open it, you can see, it is usually, I think, about 100 degrees maybe. That's too much. Let's try 80 degrees. Yeah, close enough. All right, so now the joint will articulate. But that's the key, is like when you're in the base group, these are the things that are together, and then when you make a joint, it makes a new group, and that's where you can put things under that are affected by that joint. That'll let you have more than one joint. So I have the cabinets, with the double doors and stuff. Do I have those here? I don't think I have that in this character. But anyway, that's the brief thing about how to use the workbench. And I will put together, I want to put together a tutorial on the block editor again. I think probably it's worth a refresh for Mythruna Monday, and then do one on the workbench editor. I get that the workbench editor is kind of complicated. I think you guys are probably smart enough to figure it out with some trial and error. I hope so. Anyway, the eventual version will be more clicky draggy and less fiddle with hierarchies. Like you'll have to, when you say I want to attach this, you'll have to say how you attach it with a hinge or whatever. But this is sort of a kind of a direct mapping of how the data works, and I didn't want to complicate things with like a tree, because it makes the UI more complicated, and I'm not sure it makes it any clearer unless you're already used to 3D modeling. So anyway, so that's that. And that I've done that, I can prove that I can add one to the world. So we added that, and I can click on it, and it will open and close. Now this is kind of a useless little thing because it doesn't have a top on it, but you can see how it works. And so we want to animate this so that it smoothly opens and closes, at least if it's this 1001. Yeah, so I think I had it set up to be 1 second, so it'll be at least 5 frames of animation. I think every 200 milliseconds is what we'll do. All right, so let's talk about entity systems. You guys hear me say that? I don't know if I've gone over it. I think I like scribbled some things before. But first of all, yeah, we'll talk about entity systems real quick. I think I have a. So if you imagine that you have an entity database, which is just all the objects in your game, and they each have an ID, you know, ID 1, 2, 3, and they have these things called components. That's why it's called an entity component system. So a particular entity might have a position, a shape, a mass, a name. This would be, you know, a fully fledged physical object that has a name. If you hover over it, it'll show name, etc. Whereas this is just a position and a name. Perhaps these are just like markers on the map. They don't have a shape in the game. You know, that would be the 3D shape. You know, so these two are just maybe map markers. But that's the idea, is that your entity is just a number, and you can have all these different components attached to it. And then in the game, like you have systems, and you say, well, I want to make a map, so give me every entity that's got a position and a name. Well, that would be this one, this one. These all have positions. This has a position and a name, so we get this one. This one doesn't have a name, so it's not going to get that one. This one doesn't have a name, but this one does, position and name. And so you get this. And so if you wanted the position and name entity set, it's going to have, let's see, what's the quickest way for me to do what I want to do? Oh, see, that's going to grab all of the... All right, so let's get rid of all the highlights. I wanted to show kind of like what the entity set would look like, because certainly in Zeus, which is the entity system that I wrote, that's the open source entity system, you have these entity sets, which is kind of a view of this. You say, I want the entity set of position. That's not what I want. I want the entity set of position and name, right? So it'll give me all of the entities that have position and name as their own little instances. So let me just do it this way. We'll grab all of these guys and we'll paste them over here, and I'll remove everything that wouldn't be there, right? So so this one has a position and name. So we get rid of these guys. Basically, it only pulls the part of the object over that we actually care about. So we'll get 1, 2, 3 we'll have, but we won't have these. We'll just have the position and name. And position, so we won't get this object. I'm going to delete that big box around us. We won't have that object. We won't have that object. This one has position and name. We'll keep this one. Oops. Let me know if you guys have any questions while I do this. I know it can be kind of confusing. This one we don't have because it doesn't have a name. And this one we have. So all these guys end up in that entity set where we just wanted, you know, map markers. I don't need that. So let me put my box back. And so this is the entity set of everything with a position and name in it. And this is kind of a live view of the real objects. So as they update, you know, like if somebody updated this name or this position, I have my own private view, but I can tell this entity set, okay, go ahead and update yourself. And it'll go back and it'll refresh any of these names or positions that have changed. And it'll tell me what has changed. And so what this allows me to do is if I had a map and I wanted to show all these as map markers, I can grab this entity set. I know those positions are current at the time I grabbed them. I can draw all these objects on the map. And then every now and then I can say, hey, refresh yourself and tell me about the changes. And so it'll tell me, hey, this object moved and this object moved and this object's name changed. And I can just update those specific objects on the map. The reason that this is kind of cool is because you can add new things without affecting any of your existing systems. So when I had object assemblies, if you want to think of it that way, those were new shapes, and they have, you know, the rest of things didn't care as long as they knew how to turn a shape into some 3D object. That's fine. But then these shapes are interesting because the assemblies can be opened and closed. They have like a 0 is closed, 1 is open kind of thing. So I added a new component called morph. And so the morph component basically can say, hey, this, it points to another entity and it says, hey, set this to 0.5. And so that would open this particular entity halfway. And so here's another thing that's kind of interesting. The morph component actually doesn't work this way because there's a chance that so a morph, it takes a so you like a morph has like the verb you're going to use, so in this case open, and it has a mix, right, which is 0 to 1. And then it has the target, which is the entity that it points to. And the reason I did it this way is because a particular entity could only have one morph at a time. Like it can only have one name, it can only have one position. You can't have an entity that has multiple positions. You can't have an entity that has multiple names. And so you couldn't have an entity that had multiple morphs. And yet a particular shape might have an open and close, a lock, unlock, and so on. They might have different kinds of animations associated with them. And so you don't want the morph on there. We would create a new entity, right, entity 11. And that entity would point to this entity, right? That morph would point to this one and say, hey, I want you to, open him 0.5, right? And so you create these little kind of marker entities. And so then there would be an entity set, hey, give me everything that's got a morph component on it. And that entity set says, okay, I know how to find all the things with positions, and I'll position them. So anyway, that's the kind of the way it's set up. And so the kind of, there are complicated ways to do animation. I'm going to do the hacky way, which also happens to be straightforward for explanation, which is, and instead of just a morph, I'm going to have like a morph animation, which be like another component completely attached to this same entity. Let's call it morph animation, right? And so what's that? That one's going to say, it's also going to point to this guy, right? It's also going to point to this guy. What he's going to do is he's going to say morph animation. He's going to have a verb also, and he's going to have a start time and an end time and a target. And so then we will create a system that watches for these, figures out where we are in time, and creates one of these and sets it on this same target. So whereas I have this here, you could think about this. Oops, oh crap. Let me get rid of this. So you can think of it like this is how it starts, right? We just have this morph animation guy, and then there's some system like this that pulls in all of the morph animations, and that would be the one that creates the that system would create and put that back on here, a morph that changes with time. And then when the animation is done, this could remove itself, and then we're just left with the final state. Because you don't want to leave these things around if you don't need to. So what we're going to need, hopefully that makes sense, I don't know. What we're going to need is, we're going to need this morph animation component. I've already got a morph component because that's how we do the open and close now. So we're going to need a morph animation component that looks like that. We're going to need a morph, so I got that. Morph animation component, start time, end time. Oh, we're going to need the verb. Yeah. We could probably get away with not having the verb if we used the same. Let's assume for a moment that, what I talked about over here, every field you add to one of these components is a field in the database, and so you try to avoid redundancies. And if we always make sure that the entity we care about has a morph and a morph animation, like in order to animate you have to have both, then we don't need the verb because basically we'll find an entity set that's got every one of these, and so we'll already know what the verb is. Does that make sense? Like when I looked back at my picture over here, you know, I talked about how morph animation would exist and then it will create the morph, but I think what we'll do is we'll make it so that it always has both. Whoops. Always has both. And then we, oh, that's because I've got that selected. So it always has both, and that lets us be able to remove a bunch of redundancy. So the other redundancy we could remove is the target, right? Because that's already on the morph. So the morph animation only needs start and end time. It will look for the morph component on the same entity and use that one's target. Hope that makes sense. So the morph animation system is going to get an entity set of morph and morph animation. That's all it cares about. And that's the neat thing about an entity component system. All of this code would be independent of any other kind of component you have. It doesn't care about position, it doesn't care about shape, it doesn't care about mass, it doesn't care about anything but morph, animation, and morph, those two components. And so you can develop a lot of these systems independently of one another. I'm waving my hands like that, like you guys can see that, without affecting anything else. The other thing is technically these could all run in their own thread. There's, you know, because every one of them has their own sort of isolated view, if you get multi-threading for free, et cetera, scalability, et cetera. So anyway, tonight we're going to write this component and write this, and hopefully we'll get it done in the next half an hour, and it'll all just work. Now, excuse me. So we've already got this morph component. We're going to basically do something similar. I will create a new class called morph animation. All right. And this is built right into Mythruna. It's not part of the regular stuff. Okay, morph animation. It's going to be a persistent component. We don't want our animation to stall halfway through if we happen to shut the system down while it's in the middle of an animation. Oops, entity component. Okay. So that's the same as morph. Basically, it's an entity component that just says it is what it is, and then persistent means we're going to store it in the database. And so morph animation. I think we can make those private first or protected. You know, for serialization for the database to create it, that's just an implementation detail. We're going to need to import the com subsilica ES package because that's Zeus. We want a start time in milliseconds, or yeah, I think it's actually nanoseconds. Start time and end time. So why type it again if you don't have to? Start time, long, end time. Okay, that'll tell us how we want to. That's the other thing. Entities, these components are just data. They don't tend to do any work because again, there are many different instances of them that all represent the same data. I'm going to steal some more code because there tends to be like some boilerplate. Yeah. To get like the to string and stuff working, and I find that easier. Okay, so we only need. Okay, sorry. I happen to be copying a bad example because this one, the object I'm copying from had a special kind of string that had to be looked up. Okay. Hey, how's it going? Cheers. 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 So let's do start time, end time, end time. So the other thing is, you know, I'm creating this morph animation component today, and I've already talked about how that's nice. I already talked about how that's not this kind of a hacky way, and that's one of the reasons I'm also not including extra fields in here, because eventually this will be replaced by something different, and I don't want to. Components are also anyway. they are immutable. So here I am actually adding something that's not allowed. So a component is part of the multi-threading, and the reason we can have multiple views is that in general, components should be immutable, which means you can't change a particular instance without creating another one. So this is a fully fledged component, but for funsies, let's create a factory morph animation create that takes a that would automatically get the start time and then create a duration in like real people time. And so we want to Mythruna heavily relies on SIO2, which is a library that also I was the chatter with the discussion about the sky travel mechanics. If you don't recognize the username, sky travel. Nice, cool. Blah 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 blah. Hold on, I'm trying to keep my train of thought. Okay, so we want, if we pass the sim time, which is one of these, so we want to steal this. So sim time. I got too many files open. All right, so import sim time. So if we pass sim time and a duration, oops, we will use this to create a new morph animation that has the appropriate start and end time. Okay. Oh, the chatter, like the person chatting, not like a bunch of talk. I get it. Where's my sim time? Okay, so, whoops. Actually, decay system probably has a good example of this. Decay component does. Let me go steal that. So, SIO2, which is open source, that's out already, has some utilities to do a bunch of different things. And one of them has a built-in decay system. And it probably has, yeah, in fact, oh, that's interesting. It does not. Huh. Okay. That's right. Okay. So sim time, we want to get, we don't want, I think we do want game time. We have a bunch of different times we can choose to grab. I believe we want game time, and we'll want get future time. So I get it. I'm a cut and paste coder, so I just steal this stuff. And so, you know, start time is now. So sim time, get time, and end would be sim time dot get future time duration in real seconds. Yeah, so it's to sim time. Perfect. And then we create a new morph animation from that start and that end. Okay, so this is just kind of a utility so that I don't have to remember this magic incantation every time. If I pass it a sim time, I can create a new morph animation. So so that's all good. Let's make sure it compiles, because I don't have I'm not using a fancy IDE, so it won't tell me that while I type. Okay, I think we're probably good. Yep. That almost never happens. Okay, put a space there. Okay, so the next thing is I'm going to move some stuff around. Like we had the morph system open over here, but I'm going to open it over here because I'm going to steal stuff from the morph system because it's similar. All right, so we are going to create in that same sim package a morph animation system. And this is Mythruna proprietary at the moment. So we've got that. It's going to be, so SiO2, silicon dioxide, by the way. SimSilica, get it? Has a bunch of game system stuff that basically makes sure your game system is initialized, terminated appropriately, and so on. And so that's this abstract game system, and we want to import the sim stuff here. Actually, we want both of these, so that's not a bad idea. We don't need math. And so a game system, you'll have a constructor, it will have an initialize, it will have a terminate. I think initialize, terminate are required. Start, stop, and update. If you extend abstract game system, I think that's the way it goes. I actually want okay, so we do want to know what the entity data is. That's basically the interface to Zeus. And so the neat thing about these abstract game systems is you can look up other systems really easily. We don't need to observe it, so we don't need to do that. We don't need physics. We don't need any of that garbage. All we need is the entity system. So we technically don't need to do anything. All right, so this is the basic, whoops, game system. Game system. I'm just going to put some logging in here so we can prove it starts. Basically do a little Kilroy debugging. We're going to make sure that before we get too far, we're going to make sure our code works, right? It actually is running, right? Okay, so if we go over to the game server, that's where we wire up all this stuff. And so like if I look for the morph system, that's this one. We'll probably want the morph animation system right before it. Threads can be, systems can be done multi-threaded, but typically they don't. And mostly the order doesn't matter, but sometimes it does, or sometimes there's a better order than another. And so these systems will all be run in order. And I think since our morph animation system is going to be creating morph components that are used by the morph system, we might as well put it first. It would still work, but the problem, quote unquote, would be that if we put morph animation system second, it would change a morph. We wouldn't see that until, you know, the following frame, and so we'd be always one frame delayed before starting the animation. And it's like there's no reason for that. It's easy enough to just put them in order. It doesn't really matter, but it doesn't hurt either. Okay, so let's see if this compiles. Okay, so we'll run real quick. I think we only have to get into the world. So if we continue last world, then we ought to be able to check the logs to see if our system was run and terminated when we exit. Okay, come on. Really need to improve the feedback and get rid of some logging. Okay, so if we exit the game, now if we grep morph animation system, alright, so yep, morph animation was initialized, it started, it terminated. Okay. I highly recommend if you're a software developer, if you're new to software development, at least, well, for my learning style, it always worked best to have something that works, modify it. If it breaks, you know where to go back to working, because you just remove the new stuff. And, you know, so basically continually break and fix incrementally until you have something working. And so that's kind of what we've done here. Now, I talked about how, you know, you have an entity system, or an entity set, rather, and a Zeus, let me write that down, because Zaius, like this, like Z-E-S. Why Zaius? Well, because Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes, we used to always come up with different names for our libraries that were monkey related because of JMonkey engine. And so this is an ES, an entity system. And so I called it Zaius because, Dr. Zaius from Dr. Zaius from Planet of the Apes. Anyway, Zaius will provide an entity set where we could grab this and we could iterate over them all the time and we could do stuff. But it requires a lot of manual maintenance. You have to apply the changes and then you have to keep track of that stuff. SiO2, I'll write that down too. SiO2, like that. Silicon dioxide. That's the other open source library. It provides this thing called the entity container. And nicely enough, it's already in the ES package, so we don't need to worry about that. And the entity container will do a whole lot of management for us. What we want to do is we want to define a little class here that will hold our... We're going to name it something. I'm going to show you what's in it first. So basically, we'll have... Oops. It'll have an entity. We'll have this entity, the one we talked about, this one, the one that's got the morph animation and the morph on it. Okay, so it will have that entity. It will have the morph component. And actually, we don't need that. We need... because we've got... That's already in the entity. You know what we don't need... We do need, and so we want to have, so this is the, we'll call it the animator, right? This is what's going to produce, for this entity, it's going to produce the new morphs, okay? And so we need, okay, so the next thing we need is a animator container, right? Extends entity container, and that's going to have these animators in it, right? And so entity container is that SiO2 special thing that will manage our entity set for us. And so basically we would say super, okay, we want the morph, we want all of the objects with morph, I cannot type, and morph animation, right? And then I think I have one over here I can copy some things from. I do not, because this is not that way. This one doesn't work that way. Attachment system does, maybe? Maybe not. Yeah, so some of these systems are more passive. They don't keep track of active objects. And in a world the size of Mythruna, where basically can go on infinitely, you want to keep the stuff that's resident in memory down to a minimum. The holding system is one I know has a container because it's actually a problem. It's currently watching every class, every entity with a holding object, which means any player that's ever been logged in is currently resident as one of these holders. It doesn't know that we're not logged in. It really needs another component here, like the spawn position or something that we remove from the player when they log out. So even logged out players will end up having one of these objects being tracked. Anyway, the three methods we need to override are add object, update object, and remove objects. So this entity container is managing that entity set for us, and it will, when we call, so let's go ahead and show you how this works. Animators, so on initialize, we'll say animators equals new animator container, entity data. And on here, we'll say animators start, which means we're going to start doing its things. On update, we say animators, I cannot type, update, which means it's going to do its bookkeeping. It's going to go through the entity set like I talked about. We can tell it, hey, but apply your changes and tell me what's new, what's removed, what's different. And the entity container takes care of all of that on update and ends up calling these different add object, update object, remove object. And then I believe it's animators release. Let's check. Start, update, stop. Oh, stop. Yep. It's funny how they closely correlate to these other methods. It's strange. It's almost like the same person wrote them. Haha. Okay, so we need to fix these because they're not using the right type of object. And I'm going to start using an abbreviation for the animator stuff. Okay. So when we add an object, we want to create this. Whoops. So we'll create the animator, anim equals new animator entity. Oops. All right. This entity equals entity. All right. And usually, rather than duplicating code, I'll just reuse the update object method that would be called if it changes, and just let it do its thing. Right now we're not really doing anything with these, and so it doesn't really make sense. Why am I going through all this trouble? The other thing we'll want is there's a method we can override that lets me return an array of these. Get objects, I think. Return super get objects. We have to do this because the real version is protected, and we want to change the access so that the update loop can call it. And so what we'll do here is animator anim. You know, we're going to have some interesting cross traffic. Okay, I'm not going to worry about that while I'm on this stream. Get objects, right? And so each of these we want to update morph. We don't have that method defined yet, but we're going to put it right on here. So we're going to say public void update morph. And so right now the way this is set up is every frame we will get whatever has changed the latest, we will go through them all, and we will call update morph. So any of these active animation morphs, we're going to go ahead and call update morph. And let's go ahead and log info update morph. All right, so we can prove that it's happening. We're not actually going to do anything yet. I will add a release here because I feel like there's probably going to be some final cleanup I want to do. And yeah. And so in here, basically we'll call anim release. I think we're going to ignore the update method. We actually don't care about that. But a lot of entity containers would. We don't. We want to, when the animation starts, I mean, we care if it, anyway. For the simplicity's sake, we don't care today. Okay, so all of this is hooked up. Let's make sure it compiles. Now it's not going to do anything because nothing is initiating the animation. That's what I'll do next. Gosh, we got like 10 minutes left to make this work. Think I can do it? I think I can do it inefficiently. Because there's the other thing is, like, we don't want to... Okay, so we don't have the Mythruna. In real life, what this will do, as I'm writing this now, this update method is called every 60 times a second, hopefully, right, notionally. And that's more often than we really want to be updating these morph animations. It's not a very efficient way to do animation. And normally we send things to the client, or 5 times a second or 20 times a second. Yeah, so we'll do that, like 50 milliseconds. Then that's not really what the what is the okay, so let's look up entity container real quick, because I don't have time to hunt around. Entity container should be right here. And the methods get array, of course. I was smart and I named it what it did. And now I can't find my, there it is. So I basically misnamed this method. Okay, let's try again. Yeah, both those errors were same cause. Alrighty. Oh yeah, gotta fix this up here too. Okay, so this is a lot of boilerplate to get stuff done. Unfortunately, it's not the kind of thing that you could easily create a base class for, because usually blah blah blah. Yeah, return anim. Because everything's in the customization. Okay, so that would do it. If we had an object with a morph and a morph animation on it, it would, do its thing. So what we will do is we will go over to where, so this is every open and closable object extends from this type. So when we click on open, this is the code that runs. When we click on close, this is the code that runs. Right now, we find an existing, or we create a new one. And instead of just creating the entity with that one component, or adding just that one component, we will, actually, that's fine. For right now, what we really want to do is we'd want to look up the joint information to figure out what the duration is for that joint. But for now, we're going to just add our morph animation thing that we did. And so, do I have sim time already? Yeah, I don't. Systems, game systems, sim time. So probably game systems. So in scripts, game systems is this guy. And game system manager should have a get time step on, or get step time, that's what it is. Okay, so eventually I want to improve this API, but for now we'll say game systems, so yeah, we can just say step time, and then we want it to be, let's just say 1 second, okay? So that'll try to open it over 1 second, and this will try to close it over 1 second. Yeah, that's interesting. So, first of all, this is not enough on its own because we don't know which direction to go. So morph animation, we need to know whether we're opening and opening or closing. So on the fly development, right? Morph animation. We'll call it double target. Yeah, target mix. No, we need a. See, I really just didn't want to have a start and an end mix, but that's kind of where we're coming. Again, more parameters. And I feel like there was probably a better way. And before I release this to you guys, of course I have to work that out because we made this a persistent component, which means it's stored in the database. In fact, I'm going to remove this right now, because if we store it in the database, then every field we use is locked in. And if I want to remove it later, I invalidate all of my tables. So double start mix, double end mix. And actually, it would make more sense if these were the first ones. Okay. And so, of course, that's backwards from this, so we'll fix that too. Consistency will save you also. If everything you do is always backwards from something else, you will get it wrong frequently. Okay, so public double get start mix. Turn start mix. Java and the boilerplate. If I used records for my entity components, then I wouldn't have to do all this boilerplate. But okay, so we've got those guys set up, which means in our thing over here where we're creating this, we actually want to leave these closed and set this to go from 0, 0 to 1, okay, to open it. And then down here, to close it, we want to go 1 to 0. So everything's going to be backwards. Right, I mean, it's actually just not going to work until we implement the system. Right, because to figure out whether it should enable open, it's got to already be mix 0. And in order to enable close, it's got to already be some greater than 0, but we're not going to actually change anything here. So these should assume that it's already open. Okay, so that will create the components. We've broken open and closing, but we should see a bunch of logs, a bunch of ugly logs. Because our morph animation system is going to be calling this update morph every frame for everything we've started to open. That's not really what we want to do, but that's what we'll see that's really working. Hopefully you guys can hang. I think this will take me like another 10 minutes, so hopefully you guys will hang out with me as we get this working. I just prefer to see the wiring working before I start spamming component changes. Okay. Hey, that's Fade. She's got a ponytail in that picture. I really need to add different hair at some point. I have an idea in mind for how to make that customizable too. Custom hairstyle, custom hair color. Okay, so we ought to be able to close this, and so that'll start spamming the logs if we've done everything right. Boink. Yep, look at that. So it's trying to update that morph, and it's not actually doing anything, so it left it, you know, open, right? It was already open. Because if we try, yes, if we try to close it, yeah, so it's not doing it. It's basically just going to keep repeating. So that magic was done over here, creating the right component and making sure that we don't create more than one entity. So here, we just have to do some math. So if we have the morph, I'm gonna make this more efficient later. oops. So in Java code, that is how you get the morph from the entity. I'm just going to call it MA because I'm lazy. So this gives us everything we need to calculate what our mix should be. We actually want to pass sim. Let's just get it once. T equals time, that gets sim time, or get time. We'll pass that here. So let's call it frame time. Okay, so we get a time in here. We have a start and an end. So let's figure out what the part is. So the part is time minus MA, that gets start time. Okay, the portion of time we have past start time divided by, and we want this to be in double, so divided by MA.get end time minus MA.get start time. So we want essentially the fraction of this start time to end time time span. So that'll be, assuming that time is between those two, it'll be between 0 and 1, but if part is less than 0, we will set part to 0. And I think we'll do it if part is greater than 1, we will call release. And because release is going to actually remove this component, so we stop animating it. And then we return. So if it's between 0 and 1, we want to do something with it. Now, we've already talked about how, so this is just the portion of time, and we're either going up, we're going from 0 to 1 in our morph, or we're not, so we need to do a sort of mix equals ma.get end mix minus ma.get start mix. Okay, so that's, if this was, 0 and 1, we got a -1, that's fine. What we'll end up doing, so we want this, whatever that range is, times our part. So that's how far we are in there, and we want to add that back to start mix, right? So if this is 0 and end is 1, this is just going to directly translate part into somewhere between 0 and 1. If this is 1 and this is 0, then we go negative. This should work though. End mix minus start mix. Oh wait, no, start mix is 1. That's right. So if this is 1 and this is 0, then the part will give us between 0 and basically this will be 0 minus 1, right? So part will give us between 0 and -1, but start is 1, so that will subtract it from, and so basically it's going from 1 down to 0. That's what we want. And I think morph already has a change mix. Yep. So we want to take the existing morph, morph change mix to mix, and set that back on. I think we could just say nd set morph. That will pass it right on through. Now, to make sure we stop when we get to the end, we want to remove the component from the entity. I think like like that. So when we get to the end of the animation, we will remove the morph animation component. Or if the object is removed without us doing that. In fact, well, there's something I'll go back and clean up later, which is that if we get removed early, we probably want to fast forward the animation to whichever destination it was going to go to so things don't get left in a weird state. But if I've done my math right, that's a big giant if. Giant if. In fact, it's so giant, I'm not going to be so confident as to not go ahead and log these things here. Spam the logs, right? Okay. And we'll go ahead and say release. So we'll test the hell out of everything. And if I did it right, we should be able to see animated open and close. We'll assume we get the syntax errors all taken care of. All right. There probably is math that you could use to combine these two together in something that's a little more elegant, but I prefer to see it written out. I am not a great math guy, but I know some solid foundations and rely on that heavily. I know a handful of tricks, and I stretch them as thin as possible. Okay, let's see. Will it work? Will it work? Will it work? Now, it's going to be inefficient because it's running at 60 frames a second. Okay, let's see. Will you work? Let's wait till the logging's... Okay, close. Whoa! Okay. Okay, so something's backwards, right? It's, yeah. So it still thinks it's open, right? It never actually made it to 1, probably. So, and I think I know why. Where's all of our... Okay, so we're spamming all kinds of stuff because... okay, so part mix, part mix, part mix. Let me just do this. Where was the last of the part mixes? Because of how we're doing the updates by spamming a new component every frame. Yeah, so we never actually reached the end. Because as soon as we were greater than 1, we stopped. Okay, so we never got to 1. So let me fix that real quick. Oh, yeah. I gotta let the logging go again. So here what I did this. What I really needed to do was set part equal to 1, not return. Okay, so when part is greater than 1, we just force it to 1. We still go ahead and let the morph get set, right? But we've removed the morph animation, so it's not going to come back on the next frame. But at least we'll get all the way open, and that will let us get all the way closed. Because, yeah, if it's open at all, then we have to get all the way to 0. Because if it's open at all, then it won't let us use the open animation. It assumes that things should be closed as their natural state. And so if it's not a little bit closed, it'll always open. If it's but it's got to be all the way closed before you can open it again. That's the way it's set up at the moment, anyway. Okay, so let's try it again. See, it's already saying close, but we should be able to say close, and it'll close all the way this time. And now it'll say open. Boink. Check it out. Now, obviously, this is not paying any attention to the duration I have defined in the object itself. And look at all that log spam. And we don't want it to be so smooth, actually. We want it to be, like I said, 20 times a second instead of 60 times a second, because it's really spamming it would spam the database, it would spam the thing, but otherwise it's working. Check that out. Okay, so this will be fun. Let's, so we've got this door over here, which I can open and close, and I want to do something. Where's my chair? Gotta find my chair. There's too many objects. There's the double stools. Okay, here's the chair. I'm gonna put a chair down right here. Oops, I accidentally put 2 chairs down. Okay, let me remove this chair. Okay, let's put a chair down right here. And we're gonna set it to physical. Make it a physical object. Okay, so it's an actual, you can bump in and it'll move kind of physical object. Now let's open the door and see what happens. Ready? Oh, let me make sure you guys can see. Okay. Okay, so it's noon. Okay. Ready? I'm going to open the door. Oh no! Oh well. That object is not physical enough. I think it's because it's a static object. Shoot. And the static object motion doesn't trigger this to... that's unfortunate. I hoped that would work automatically, but... Oh, see, again, because it was because the object had been asleep. Like, if I cause the object to wake up, and then it moves it, right? So, yes, the door is physical. Like, so... like, if I try to run through it, I can't. If I open it, it moves me out of the way, because... it's a physical object. Oh, let's see, I moved the chair. But it's not like, it's not physical like the chair is. Oops. Ah, crap. I used the wrong button. Okay, so it's not physical like the chair is. Oh yeah, everything's all confused. In the sense that it's not flippy flopping around. I can make it. Oh, I can't. I didn't create it, so I can't. Let me make a door I've created. Where's the door? Here's one. Okay, so right, this door starts as static. I can't walk through it. I can open it, and then I can walk through it. Right. So it is a physical thing. Like I can't walk. I mean, I teleported through the door apparently. Okay. So. But if I was to now make this a physical object, it's going to fall. Oh, it didn't fall over. Here, let me close the door. Ah. Oh, it didn't fall over. Check it out. If I bump it at all, it should fall over, though. Oh. Oh, yeah. There's some... there it goes. So I just... You know, it's a physical object. I can knock the door around. What happens if I open it? Oh, there it goes. Check it out. That's awesome. Whee! I got stuck on the door. Let's close the door. Oh, physics engines are great, guys. And so if I turn that back into a static object and then move it at all, it stands back up. I think that, yeah, so we should have a... Yeah, so I can open and close it again. This was disappointing though. I need to fix the collisions anyway because wrong key again. Wrong button. Like one of the things I want to have happen is if the door hits something that's immobile, like if it hits let's say I had you know, blocks next to it and it couldn't physically open into that. I want it to stop whatever animation it was performing. And so there's going to have to be, during animation, there's going to have to be some awareness of the physics engine. So let's move this over here and I'll show you what I'm talking about. Well, actually, rather than me switching tools, I can just come over here. Okay, so let's say the door is like right here. I think the way I have it set up, it will try to open into this. Whoops. Yeah, see, it opened into the wall. And what I want to have happen during the animation is that it's a little smarter. And so if it detects a contact between the door frame or from the, whatever it is, whatever its shape is, during an animation, if it detects that its shape has intersected with static matter, in this case the blocks, it would stop the animation, just freeze it right there. So best we would get partially in the wall. But in that process, I could also detect that if the door is hitting a object like the chair, that it would wake it up. Because what happens is these chairs go to sleep. Can I show? Yeah. So I think that these, when it's blue like this, that means it's asleep. Yeah. So, or yeah, blue is as cold as possible. So it's like if you think of it like temperature, and like the closer it gets to red, I think it's the hotter it is. So like if I made a chair, how do I get back to my chair? All right, so let's make a chair here. So this is a static object. It's not actually, it's completely illusion. So if we make it a static object, make it solid. So we see that's black is static. If we switch over to make it, first of all, we want to move it up in the sky, right? I want to have lots of movement from this guy. So let's put it up here. Oops. So let's put it up here. We want it to like show a lot of, so let's make it physical. Yeah, it's again not super important. I'm mostly focused on gameplay right now. If every like if you could go out and fight monsters and talk to NPCs and get quests and stuff and doors still clipped through walls, I'm totally happy with that. So I'm not going to sweat over it now, but eventually this is going to be important, and I'll explain in a second why. Don't let me forget to explain why it's important. So anyway, if I make this physical, you should see it's like it got really bright green. Oh, so, yeah, so it goes blue to green. So it's green, it's active. So an object has a temperature, and the higher the temperature, like the more kinetic energy it has, but eventually it goes to sleep and it's blue. And so what happens in this case is the chair is sitting here, but it's blue, and so it's not actually responding to physical stuff, not static physical stuff. Like if I run into it, it's going to do it because I'm another mobile object, and so our two contacts will cause that to get hot again. But this is not a mobile object. It's a static object that just happens to be animated. And so when I close it, the chair doesn't know to react to it. It doesn't. There's nothing. These aren't real collisions from rigid body to rigid body. That's why if I set it moving, and I get that green color to it, and then close. Oops, I moved it too much. But anyway, and that's why it would be somewhat affected by the door. So if I just had the door know that it was intersecting something and wake it up, that should fix that problem. So let's delete some of this garbage that I created. But anyway, we can open and close doors now, and so that's kind of cool. So yeah, so if I stood here, and it moves me out of the way, kind of. But yeah, so the very next thing is I'm going to, and this was actually a potential topic. Yeah. Yes. So the next thing, as I mentioned last live stream, my next immediate feature is going to be to implement some kind of quest. And so the very next thing I have to do is for each town, I want to have there be at least one random NPC that you can walk up and talk to get a quest. It may be a stupid quest like, go get my axe out of the cave nearby or something, but it'll be some kind of quest that you can go on and bring that back to him, and he would say thank you, basically, because there's no loot yet, right? Maybe you'll get a little trophy for your inventory here or something, but it requires that I put a bunch of infrastructure in, which would be necessary for everything. So that's my goal for December. For the New Year's release, is to have some NPC wandering around here that you can go up and get a quest from. And how complicated I'm able to make those random quests just depends on how fast I get things done. But eventually I want like the test one that we can use to plop these little Gafen down. That's my next immediate thing this weekend, is to make this so I can plop a random NPC down just to test some things. Because look, you can actually click on the Gafen and it does its default action too. And I'm going to implement a pet for the Gafen, so if you click on him, it'll pet instead of... see, he's moving so fast you can't actually get... Yeah, you can get a default action. Cool. Yeah, so that's the other thing. I don't know if I took... Yeah, we have default actions. If you hover over him, it tells you what the default action is. Oh, check it out. It's animated. I forgot. It's awesome. Oh, man. So, yeah, so by January, I want to have at least some kind of quest. And then the next thing will be building out some creatures. I want pets. My dog's kind of sick at the moment, so I'm looking forward to having some dogs in the game that we can have as our pets and so on. And then from there, that's where I'll start developing the creature to general creature AI that will lead to creatures, and I have to figure out what the control scheme is going to be for actually attacking things, because I doubt this is going to work. It's nice, it's cool, but I doubt this is going to be very satisfying as far as killing things, right? Like it's very hard to even hit the Gafen if you tried. You can kind of do it, but I don't know if I can make that satisfying. But I have a lot of ideas for interesting combat for clicking and things, and anyway, stances and things to get to. But we'll get something basic in place first, so we can go around and kill whatever skeletons or whatever it is, the ferret goblins or whatever it is. All right, so anyway, this is the that's the thing. We can we can yeah, so it's animated now. It's so stupid. It's unnecessary. Like, you guys would have probably been fine with just snap open, snap close, but I don't know, it makes a big difference to me. Oh, look at the little shadow. Yeah, that's kind of cool. So yeah, all these guys will open and close now. And I'm holding the sword, so if I try to left click it, it's going to do this bit, right? Whack, 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 whack. See, I got to be able to bash the swords open, close. Yeah, so I have to still hook this up properly to not be quite that smooth, and to actually use the duration that's configured in the workbench, because when you configure a joint, you can say, those chests that look like this are supposed to open in half a second, and right now they're hard coded to a second because that's what I put in my script. So I actually have to look up the shape and load its joint information and stuff. But that's like, I don't know. I've done that before. That's originally how it knew to open and close and stuff. So I think that's going to be it for the stream, guys. Thanks for sticking around for the extra time. This shows that 6 of you are on, so I must have been at least that interesting. Either that or you guys used me to fall asleep, and I hope you sleep well and have sweet dreams and so on. Yeah, so, if you guys are working on something, I hope that you're productive this week. I'm looking forward to the Christmas break, which I plan to get a lot of Mythruna work done over the Christmas break. But so far I've been able to carve out an hour or two here and there to get some stuff done, which is kind of cool. Thanks again to the patrons. Like, comment, and subscribe. If you haven't already subscribed, it's the little bell right below the whatever you're looking at, which is kind of cool. And then you can also hit the little thumbs up and feed the algorithm. I think it matters because we've had a few random people who've stumbled across this stream in recent weeks, and it all kind of builds the followers, and we meet new nice people that like Mythruna. Anyway, I will sign off until next time. Thanks for joining.